Some weeks in horror history feel like they're all pulling on the same nerve. This one is about the moment a normal thing turns hostile. A ravenous little alien pest, a household mirror, a joke sequel that still reminds you how powerful the genre had gotten. A world where even the sound of your own breathing can get you killed. And then, for our deep-cut spotlight, a nasty little Canadian cosmic nightmare that feels like somebody fused John Carpenter paranoia, Lucio Fulci goo, and a midnight VHS hallucination into one blood-slick fever dream. So, if you hear something scratching in the walls, maybe ignore it. If your reflection looks a little too interested in you, definitely don't trust it. And if something small, round, and covered in teeth comes rolling out of the dark, don't kid yourself. Run. Welcome back to This Week in Horror History. I'm your host, Enrique Couto. Coming up, a modern monster movie that turned silence into pure box office terror. A gleefully dumb, self-aware franchise entry that proves horror was big enough to parody itself again. A cursed mirror story that helped turn Mike Flanagan into a name horror fans will never forget. And a ravenous little creature feature that turned pint-sized furballs into total chaos. Then, after the break, for our deep-cut spotlight, a hospital siege, a cult in white robes, and a cosmic nightmare that looks like it crawled straight out of a forbidden VHS tape. April 6th, 2018, A Quiet Place opens in theaters. And it instantly reminds everyone that tension can be louder than chaos. John Krasinski's film takes one simple idea, monsters hunt by sound, and builds an entire survival nightmare around it. Every footstep matters. Every creak feels fatal. Every family interaction has the weight of life or death. What made it hit so hard is that it plays like a studio crowd pleaser and a stripped-down monster exercise at the same time. It's emotional, it's ruthless, and it turns silence into one of the great horror gimmicks of the 2010s. It was a genuine monster hit as well, pulling in more than $188 million domestically, kicking off one of modern horror's most reliable franchises. And in my opinion, the franchise as a whole works really well. I actually loved A Quiet Place Day One a hell of a lot. So if you want to revisit them or get quiet for the first time, you can check it out streaming on Paramount Plus with your subscription, or rent or purchase it via Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. On April 12th, 2013, Scary Movie 5 lands in theaters, and while nobody's arguing it's the crown jewel of the franchise, it is a funny little timestamp for how dominant horror had become again. By this point, the series is riffing on Paranormal Activity, Mama, Black Swan, Evil Dead-style imagery, and the whole possession found footage era that had flooded multiplexes. Even when the film whiffs, it accidentally works as a snapshot of what horror culture looked like in the early 2010s. Everything was demonic, cursed, shaky cam, and very, very marketable. It made just over $32 million domestically, which is a long fall from the earlier entries, but as a horror history maker, it still tells a story. Horror had become so mainstream again that parodies could coast on recognition alone, and as we prepare to see the brand new Scary Movie 6, it seems like we're still there. And I'm not gonna lie, not the biggest Scary Movie fan in the world, but I'm excited to see them roast some A24 and Blumhouse titles. So if you want to bone up on the previous entry before Part 6 hits theaters on June 5th, just head to your favorite service to rent or buy digital movies like Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, or Fandango at home. And you could even do the whole wazaa thing if you want. I won't tell anyone. On April 11th, 2014, Oculus arrives and gives us one of the meanest haunted object movies of the last 20 years. This is the one with the laser glass, a mirror that doesn't just show you ghosts, it rewrites your sense of reality until you can't tell memory, hallucination, and self-destruction apart. Mike Flanagan takes a premise that could have been cheap and turns it into something elegant but nasty and genuinely upsetting. The genius of Oculus is how it weaponizes structure. Past and present blur together, trauma loops back on itself, and the more the characters try to control the curse, the more doomed they feel. On a reported budget of $5 million, it earned $44.4 million at the box office worldwide, punching way above its weight class, and it became one of the key stepping stones in Flanagan's rise, later blowing many horror fans' minds with films like Gerald's Game and Dr. Sleep, as well as series like Midnight Mass and, The Haunting of Hill House. I love that one. And I want to mention, I saw Oculus in the theater and I had not heard anything about it, and I was even familiar with Mike Flanagan's previous film. I just went to see a movie in the theater I didn't recognize, and I had a great time with it. I really recommend watching Oculus if you've never before, and especially if you're a big fan of what Mike Flanagan has been up to as of late. If you want to catch it right now, you can either watch it on Amazon Prime with your subscription, or buy/rent it on Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. But be careful, you might not like what looks back at you when you peer into the glass. On April 11th, 1986, Critters rolls into theaters and proves that sometimes the best monster movie hook is simple. What if something small, fast, mean, and very hungry fell out of the sky and ruined your whole night? The film drops those little extraterrestrial piranha balls into rural Kansas and just lets the mayhem rip. It's part creature feature, part sci-fi mischief, part midnight movie with some gremlin energy, but not enough to be sued. And that's exactly why it lasts. Critters knows these monsters are funny, right up until they're chewing through the room, and you as well. While it wasn't a giant blockbuster, it did perform very well, earning around $13.2 million domestic on an estimated $2 million budget, strong enough to spawn a whole franchise and secure its place as one of the great 1980s tiny monster movies. And in my opinion, there's not a bad one in the bunch. Yes, I even like the one in space. Fight me. What makes it matter for horror history is that perfect B-movie confidence. It's scrappy, weird, and cheerful about turning a farmhouse siege into a nasty little party. And hey, part 2 is even appropriate for Easter. I mean, as appropriate as it can be, considering they eat flesh, but I digress. Whether you've never seen Critters before or you're hungry for more, it's available to watch right now free on Tubi TV with ads, and of course you can also catch it on the Roku channel, Amazon Prime with your subscription, or rent it on Google Play, YouTube, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. Make sure you're subscribed, because right here tomorrow on the Weekly Spooky feed, we're heading out onto a frozen lake in Ontario, where a man settles into a tiny ice fishing hut for a long, lonely night, miles from shore. At first, it's just the usual discomfort. The cold, the wind, the dark. The kind of silence that makes you feel very, very small. But sometime after midnight, something begins hitting the walls of the hut. Then later, at 2:30 in the morning, comes something even worse. A slow, deliberate knock at the door. Not the wind, not the ice, not a random bump in the night. A knock. And out there beyond that thin little shack, there should be absolutely no one. What follows is a night of dread, confusion, and sheer psychological terror, with every sound outside turning that frozen lake into a place that feels completely cut off from the rest of the world. And when morning finally comes, what's waiting in the snow only makes the whole thing worse. So tune in tomorrow and hear our brand new horror story, Knock Knock, keeping your week spooky. Now let's take a quick break, but when we come back, we're heading into our deep cut spotlight. A half-dead man stumbles into a hospital. Figures in white hoods surround the building, and inside, something ancient, wet, and very, very wrong is waiting in the dark. All right, we're back, my spookies. So, let's get into our deep cut spotlight. April 7th, 2017, The Void hits U.S. theaters, and if you love your horror practical, slimy, and unapologetically midnight movie nasty, this one is like catnip. The setup is simple and beautiful. A near-empty hospital in the middle of the night, a cop bringing in an injured man, and a growing sense that the building has already been cut off from the rest of reality. Outside, there are robed cultists surrounding the place. Inside, bodies start changing. And not in a heavy-handed CGI kind of transformation way. I mean old-school, fleshy, oozing, nightmare fuel changing. The Void feels like a deliberate throwback, but not in a lazy remember this kind of way. It understands why those older films worked, the fluorescent emptiness of the hospital. The sense that the characters are trapped in a place that should feel safe, but absolutely doesn't. The idea that the true horror isn't just death, it's transformation, corruption, becoming something that can still move, still scream, but isn't you anymore. What really makes it sing is the escalation. It begins like a siege movie, mutates into body horror, and then keeps widening the aperture until it becomes cosmic. By the end, it's not just about surviving monsters in a hallway. It's about staring into something vast and ancient and realizing the universe may be much crueler than you ever understood. That's why it's a perfect little deep cut. It didn't make much money on release, however. It wasn't a mainstream breakout, but for a certain kind of horror fan, the practical effects sicko, the John Carpenter devotee, the Fulci gremlin, as I consider myself, it became a favorite almost immediately. If you've never seen The Void, why not take a moment and look into that bad boy now? It's available to stream free with ads via Tubi TV, Plex, and on Amazon Prime with your subscription. You can also rent it or buy it at Fandango at Home, Google Play, and Apple TV. Now it's time to light a black candle for some horror birthdays. First up, a true legend. Born on April 8th, 1955, Kane Hodder, the man who put brute force physicality into Jason Voorhees and became one of horror's great behind-the-mask icons. Kane was not only the only actor to ever portray Jason Voorhees more than once, but he's legendary for his affable nature, sense of humor, and how beloved he is with fans and how much he loves them right back. A very happy birthday to Kane Hodder. Next up, born on April 10th, 1988, Haley Joel Osment. Forever tied to The Sixth Sense, one of the all-time great supernatural shockers, and an ending so twisty and legendary that it basically became a cliché. Happy birthday, Haley. Born on April 11th, 1942, Damian Thomas. He's not exactly a household name, but if you know him, you know him. He's unforgettable to Hammer horror fans as the decadent villain in Twins of Evil. A very happy birthday, Damian Thomas. Unfortunately, this one is bittersweet. Born on April 12th, 1951, a character actor to end all character actors known for modern and classic horror films, Tom Noonan was born, and unfortunately, we lost him very recently. Whether you loved him in Manhunter or in House of the Devil, or like me, you remember him so fondly for being Frankenstein in Monster Squad. He left such a mark on so many people from so many different films in so many different ways, from being scary and creepy and freaky to being heartwarming and charming and comforting. Happy birthday, Tom. You are very, very missed. For our then and now, this week in horror history is all about trust collapsing. In 2013, horror is big enough to parody itself again. In 2014, the danger is inside the home, hanging on the wall, waiting for you to look at it. In 2017, the walls of reality start peeling back in a half-empty hospital. And in 2018, silence itself becomes a death sentence. Then 1986 crashes through the wall with tiny teeth, bad attitudes, and one of the great little creature feature swarms of the decade. Different tones, different budgets, different eras. Same lesson. Horror loves taking ordinary things and proving how fragile ordinary really is. And for our weekly recommendation, we go back to April 12th, 1985, when Cat's Eye opens in theaters. If you want something that plays like a funhouse version of horror itself, go with Cat's Eye. This Stephen King anthology is one of those movies that feels deceptively breezy right up until it gets weird, nasty, and strangely sincere. A smoking cessation nightmare, a deadly bet on a rooftop ledge, a child menaced by a tiny monster only she can see, and threading all of it together, one battered stray cat moving through the edges of every story, like he knows a lot more than we do. Although most cats, I think, move around the world like they know a lot more than we do. But that's why it makes it such a good recommendation. This week's episode is full of horror built from simple hooks, silence, mirrors, even alien pests, contamination, and pattern recognition. Cat's Eye works the same way. It takes compact ideas and lets them bite hard. And it has that perfect 1980s anthology flavor. A little mean, a little funny, very cozy for about 30 seconds at a time, and then suddenly very interested in ruining your night. If you want to dive into this classic 80s horror anthology film and get a little creep on, you can watch it with your subscription to Howdy, which is apparently Roku Channel's new paid service, or you can rent or purchase it digitally at Apple TV and Fandango at home. Well, my spookies, that's your trip through April 6th through April 12th in horror history. Don't forget, tomorrow, Wednesday, there's a fresh horror story waiting for you on Weekly Spooky, and we're featuring a brand new author, so you won't want to miss it. And of course, on Friday, we always have something a little special for you. On Saturday, we have a collection of some of the scariest tales from the Weekly Spooky Vault. On Sunday, we have Well, it's called Unknown Broadcast, and we don't exactly know what it is. And of course, on Monday, we bring you Terrifying and True, because sometimes the biggest fears aren't fictional. And then, of course, Tuesday, we'll be right back here. So until then, remember, our days are numbered, because that's how we tell them apart. See you next time.